She was denied pregnancy by her ex-husband and thrown under the rain, until the Mafia boss said, "Come with me now." The rain pelted her face as Sophia stood in the driveway, shaking. Her world shattered in the blink of an eye. Her husband, Marcus, the man she had trusted with everything, had just thrown her out. The pregnancy she had dreamed of was a burden in his eyes, a trap to tie him down to a life he didn't want. His cruel words echoed in her mind, and his face, once filled with love, now looked at her with nothing but contempt. Tears mixed with the rain as she stood alone, the weight of betrayal sinking deep into her chest. This was the end. She had nothing left. Then a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a man with cold, intense eyes. His voice was dark, commanding, and impossible to ignore. "Get in." Sophia hesitated, confusion flooding her mind. Who was he? Why did he stop for her? But she couldn't refuse. She stepped into the car, her heart racing. What did he want from her? What was about to unfold? This was the moment that would change everything. Before we start, let me know in the comment section where in this beautiful world you are watching from, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to this amazing channel. That way, YouTube will keep showing you wonderful stories from this channel. Now, let's begin. Sophia Carter had built her life from nothing. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She earned every step she took. From a young age, she was determined to make her own way in the world. And she did just that. Her journey started humbly, working long hours at a small marketing firm right after graduating with a degree in business administration. Her early career was anything but glamorous. She spent countless hours learning the ins and outs of the industry, navigating a world dominated by men, who often looked at her with skepticism because of her age and gender. But she never let that stop her. Instead, it fueled her to work harder, to prove herself, to carve a space for her name. Sophia's breakthrough came a few years later when she saw an opportunity. The world was shifting, businesses were expanding online, and social media was becoming the new marketplace. She took a risk. She launched her own marketing agency with a clear vision: to help companies use digital platforms to reach their audience and grow. Her agency, Carter Communications, was small at first, just a handful of employees and a limited budget. But her relentless drive and ability to adapt to the ever-changing digital landscape quickly set her apart. She was a natural leader, and before long, the agency began to gain traction. Her clients, mostly startups at first, were seeing real growth through her strategies, and her reputation spread. Sophia didn't just sell marketing services. She sold a vision, a promise of success. Years passed, and Carter Communications grew into one of the most respected marketing agencies in the city. Sophia had worked tirelessly, scaling her business, networking with influential figures, and making key decisions that would ensure her agency's success. By the time she was 30, she had built something incredible. Her agency was profitable, highly sought after, and had contracts with some of the city's top corporations. But despite her professional success, there was always an emptiness she couldn't fill, a void she had hoped would be filled by her personal life. Marcus entered her life when things were finally falling into place. He was charming, ambitious, and above all, seemed to understand her need for independence. He wasn't like the others who had come before him. He didn't see her as a threat but as an equal. They met at a networking event, and it was a spark that ignited something real. Marcus had just launched his own tech startup, and his vision was as grand as Sophia's. They had similar drive and ambition, and their chemistry was undeniable. The two of them quickly became a power couple, effortlessly balancing their personal lives with their professional success. Marcus supported her business decisions, and she supported his tech ventures. Together, they appeared unstoppable. They were the perfect match, or at least that's what everyone thought. For the first few years of their marriage, things seemed perfect. They celebrated milestones together: company expansions, personal achievements, and the milestones of their marriage. They traveled the world, made deals, and enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle that many envied. Marcus was charming, confident, and protective of Sophia, making her feel safe in ways she had never imagined. But slowly, Marcus began to change. He was still the same ambitious man, but his obsession with success started to overshadow their relationship. The little gestures that had once made her feel loved became fewer and fewer. Instead of supporting her career, he began to undermine her, questioning every decision she made, second-guessing every business move. At the same time, he became increasingly controlling in their personal life. Sophia had always prided herself on her independence, but now she found herself living in a constant state of tension. Marcus demanded more of her time, pulling her away from her agency. He'd claimed to be concerned about her health, worried she was overworking herself, but the truth was more complicated. He no longer seemed to view her as a partner. He saw her as a tool, a way to further his own ambitions. It wasn't just the business that suffered. Their personal life became strained. Marcus would lash out over small things. She was spending too much time at the office, not enough time focusing on their home. And yet, when she tried to address the growing distance between them, he would brush her off. The words, "I'm doing this for us, Sophia," became his mantra. He told her he was doing all of it for their future, but Sophia began to wonder what kind of future they were building. The moment Sophia realized that her marriage was in trouble came just a few months ago, when she discovered she was pregnant. At first, she was thrilled. She imagined a future with Marcus and a family to share their success with. It was the perfect time. She was healthy, their finances were stable, and they were still in love, at least that's what she thought. When she took the pregnancy test and saw the 2 pink lines appear, a wave of emotion surged through her. She went straight to Marcus, eager to share the news with him. This pregnancy would be the fresh start they both needed. This could fix everything. But when she told him, his reaction was anything but what she expected. At first, there was silence, and then Marcus exploded. He accused her of trying to trap him, of manipulating him into staying in a marriage that he no longer wanted. His words stung as he told her he had no interest in raising a child, especially not one that could affect his freedom and the image he had worked so hard to build. "Do you think I'll stay because of this? You're trying to tie me down, Sophia," Marcus snapped, his voice laced with contempt. "This pregnancy isn't going to fix things between us." Sophia was in shock, struggling to process his words. She tried to reason with him, telling him she loved him, that they could figure it out together, but Marcus was relentless. He accused her of using the pregnancy to manipulate him, claiming that a baby would tie him to her for life. The moment Sophia realized Marcus no longer cared for her the way he once had, her heart shattered. Sophia pleaded with him, hoping he would come around, but Marcus was unmoved. He demanded that she terminate the pregnancy, throwing around words like burden and trap. The very person who had promised to be her partner now wanted nothing to do with the life they had built. When she refused, Marcus became even colder. He made it clear that he would not raise a child with her. He told her she had one last chance to make things right, or she would be on her own. That night, he threw her out. The wind howled, and the rain poured down as Sophia stood, drenched and broken, in front of their sprawling mansion. Marcus had thrown her out like she was nothing, not even allowing her a moment to gather her things. Her world came crashing down. Sophia stood in the rain, her body trembling, her heart heavy with betrayal. She thought of the life she had built with Marcus, the future they had dreamed of, and now it was all gone. The man she had loved, the man she had worked so hard for, had discarded her with no care or remorse. And then, just as she was about to give up, she heard a car pull up beside her. A sleek black vehicle, the windows rolled down. A man with dark, intense eyes looked at her, his gaze sharp and commanding. "Get in," his voice was low, his tone strong. Sophia hesitated. Who was this man? What did he want from her? "I said, get in," the man repeated, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. She didn't know why, but in that moment, something about him made her trust him. She stepped into the car, unsure of where it would take her, but knowing she had nothing left to lose. She didn't know why, but in that moment, something about him made her trust him. She stepped into the car, unsure of where it would take her, but knowing she had nothing left to lose. The door clicked shut behind her with a finality that felt almost surreal, as if the last door of her old life had just been closed for good. The car was cold and sleek, its leather seats polished and pristine, the interior softly lit by dim amber lights. Sophia sank into the seat, pulling her drenched coat tighter around her as the car began to move. She felt a strange weight settle over her. Part exhaustion, part something else, something she couldn't yet name. She glanced at the man sitting across from her. He was silent at first, his face set in sharp, unreadable lines. His eyes, dark, almost black, seemed to pierce through the dim light. His presence was magnetic, a quiet power that made her feel small in comparison, though she couldn't figure out why. Despite the cold wind still howling outside, the car felt like an oasis of warmth. The tension in her chest began to ease, but the questions kept coming. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? And why did she feel so drawn to him despite the utter uncertainty of the situation? The man finally broke the silence, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm Viktor Volkov," he said, the name rolling off his tongue with an accent she couldn't place. "You're far from home, aren't you, Sophia?" Her heart skipped at the mention of her name. How did he know it? She glanced at him, but his face remained unreadable. "How do you know my name?" He turned his gaze towards her, his eyes focused, calculating. "I know everything I need to know." His tone was matter-of-fact, yet there was something strangely reassuring in it. Like he was no stranger to control, no stranger to having all the answers. Sophia didn't respond immediately. The rain that had soaked her to the bone was still fresh on her skin, and she felt a shiver crawl up her spine, though not from the cold. It was a shiver of vulnerability, of uncertainty. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you stop for me? Why help me?" Victor remained silent for a moment, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Because I see something in you," he finally said, his voice measured. "I see potential. Strength. You've been thrown away, discarded by people who never understood you. I can offer you a way out." Sophia's heart twisted painfully at his words. She had been discarded, just like that, without a second thought by the man she had spent years building a life with. Marcus had thrown her out, just as he had thrown away the dreams they once shared. She had nothing left. The car glided smoothly through the rain-slicked streets, the headlights cutting through the darkness. They didn't speak for a while, the only sound the steady hum of the engine and the soft tap of rain on the windows. Sophia's thoughts were a whirlwind. She wasn't sure if Victor's offer was genuine or some kind of trap. After all, she didn't even know who he was or why he was offering her anything at all. The more she thought about it, though, the more she realized she had nowhere else to go. No friends, no family nearby. And the man who had once promised to love her, to be by her side, Marcus, had turned into someone she didn't recognize. This strange man in front of her, Viktor Volkov, was the only person who had shown any interest in helping her, even if she didn't fully understand his motives. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice tinged with hesitation. "A place where you can rest, recover, but also a place where you can decide what you want to do with the rest of your life," Victor said, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. "But before you make any decisions, let me explain what I'm offering you." Sophia watched him intently. His calm demeanor, his controlled movements, everything about him screamed power. It was impossible not to feel that power radiating off of him. Yet there was something in his eyes, something deep and knowing, that made her feel like she had known him for far longer than the few minutes they had shared. "I run an empire, Sophia," he continued, his voice steady. "I control businesses, properties, and people. And I can offer you more than just safety. I can offer you the chance to rise, to rebuild, to reclaim what you've lost." Sophia stared at him, trying to process his words. An empire? Who was this man? She had heard of Viktor Volkov before, but only in passing, whispers in the business world, rumors of a powerful mafia boss who controlled both the legitimate and the underworld sectors of the city. He was notorious, feared, and untouchable. But that was all she knew. "You want me to join you?" she asked, the incredulity in her voice clear. "Why?" Victor's lips curved into a faint, inscrutable smile. "Not to join me. To join the world I've built. You've already proven you have the strength to succeed on your own. But you've been held back by those who couldn't see your worth. I see it. and I can give you the freedom to thrive." Sophia wasn't sure if she should be terrified or intrigued. Part of her wanted to refuse, to pull away from whatever Victor was offering, because it sounded too good to be true. But the other part of her, the part that had been betrayed and abandoned, felt a flicker of hope. Could this be her chance to rebuild, to escape the mess that Marcus had left behind? The car turned a corner, and as the rain began to lighten, they entered a part of the city Sophia had never seen before. The buildings were grander, the streets quieter, and the air felt different. Heavier, more mysterious. They pulled up to a private estate, a mansion nestled behind tall iron gates. "We're here," Victor said, as the car stopped in front of the grand entrance. Sophia looked at the estate, her eyes wide. She had been to upscale neighborhoods before, but this felt different. This was a world of luxury, of power, of secrets. Victor opened the door and stepped out, holding it open for her. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand to help her out of the car. Sophia hesitated for only a moment before stepping out of the car, her feet sinking into the soft gravel path. She followed him up the steps and into the mansion. It was opulent. Expensive art lined the walls, chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the air was filled with the faint smell of something rich and foreign. As Victor led her inside, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was entering a world that was both alluring and dangerous. The power, the mystery, the allure of this new life were intoxicating. But she knew one thing for sure. She could no longer stay in the life she had left behind. Marcus, her failed marriage, the heartbreak, those things no longer defined her. She didn't know what Victor's world held, but she knew one thing. This was her chance to start over. To take control of her future, to become the woman she was meant to be, beyond the pain of the past. And so, for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophia took a deep breath, ready to step into the unknown. The door to the mansion closed behind them with a heavy thud, and as the shadows of the estate swallowed them up, Victor's voice echoed in the silence. "Welcome to your new life, Sophia. But remember, nothing in my world comes without a price." As the door shut, Sophia couldn't help but wonder, what had she just walked into? The rain poured in heavy sheets as the sleek black car glided through the city streets. The world outside was a blur of wet asphalt, glowing streetlights, and the endless rhythm of water hitting the windshield. Inside, the atmosphere was still, heavy with unspoken words. The air inside the car smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, and the hum of the engine was the only sound besides the soft, steady rhythm of the rain. Sophia sat across from Victor, her eyes still adjusting to the strange reality she found herself in. She had no idea who this man truly was, only that he had shown her kindness when she was at her lowest point, an offering that was so foreign to her that she couldn't tell if it was genuine or just a means to an end. The car cut through the rain, its interior warm, but her mind was still racing. She hadn't spoken much since getting into the car. Victor hadn't pressured her to either. His presence in the car was commanding, like a force she couldn't deny, and despite herself, she felt the pull of his authority. He didn't have to say much. The way he sat, straight-backed, calm and self-assured, spoke volumes. There was something about him that felt untouchable, dangerous even. "You've been through a lot," Victor finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was low and steady, with an accent that made his words sound deliberate, measured. "I can see the cracks in your armor. People like you, people who have built something from nothing, don't break easily. But even the strongest people get knocked down. What you do after that, that's what defines you." Sophia shifted in her seat, unsure how to respond. She wanted to speak, but something about his words unsettled her. He was right, she had been knocked down. First by Marcus and now by everything she had once believed in. But that didn't mean she was broken. She wasn't broken, she was simply lost. What Victor was offering her wasn't just an escape. It was a chance to reclaim what she had lost. But at what cost? "You've worked your entire life for what you have, Sophia," Victor continued, his eyes still focused on the road ahead. "But what happens when the people you trust throw it all away? What happens when everything you've worked for crumbles in front of your eyes?" Sophia's throat tightened as the weight of his words hit her. She wasn't sure if he was speaking about her directly or just generalizing. But it felt personal. Marcus had shattered her trust, stripped away everything they had built together, leaving her with nothing but memories of a life she could never return to. "Does it hurt?" Victor asked, his voice softer now. The betrayal. The sense of losing everything. Sophia looked at him, her lips parting as if to speak, but she couldn't find the words. She nodded instead, her heart heavy. "It does," she whispered. "It hurts more than I thought it would. I thought I could trust him. I thought we had something real. But I was wrong." Victor's eyes flicked toward her for a split second, a subtle hint of something unreadable in them. He nodded slowly, his lips curling into the faintest of smiles. "You were right to trust him once, but people change. They show you who they really are when it matters the most." The car took a sharp turn, and Sophia's grip tightened on the seat. She wasn't sure if it was the intensity of Victor's words or the darkness of the streets outside, but a feeling of dread slowly began to seep into her bones. She had no idea where this car was headed or where Victor was leading her, but in that moment, she felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand. "There's more to this city than you realize, Sophia," Victor said, his tone becoming more serious. "This world you've lived in, this business world where you built your success, there's a darker side to it. A side where the people with true power never let go. They never lose control. They just take more." Sophia frowned, trying to make sense of his cryptic words. "What do you mean?" Victor's eyes remained focused ahead, the city lights flashing in his gaze. "I don't just control businesses, Sophia. I control much more than that. I own parts of this city. Its wealth. Its secrets. It's a world where loyalty is the currency and power is everything. I know what it's like to be betrayed, to be discarded by the people you trust. But I didn't let it break me. I used it. I made it work for me." Sophia's heart skipped. The way Victor spoke, so confidently, so assuredly, made her realize that this wasn't just talk. This wasn't just a man of influence. This was a man who controlled everything in his world. "You're a mafia boss," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop herself. Victor's eyes met hers for the first time since the ride began. His gaze was steady, unwavering. That's one way to put it. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She had heard rumors about Viktor Volkov, stories of a mafia kingpin who ruled the city's underground empire, a man whose influence spanned from the darkest alleys to the most prestigious boardrooms. But sitting here, across from him in the back of a luxury car, those rumors felt almost too surreal to comprehend. "Why are you telling me this?" Sophia asked, her voice shaky. "What do you want from me?" Victor finally smiled, the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. "I'm offering you an opportunity, Sophia. A chance to rise. To rebuild your life on your terms. You've been knocked down, but I don't believe you're done yet. You're stronger than this. Stronger than he gave you credit for." Sophia didn't know what to say. His offer sounded too good to be true. After everything Marcus had done to her, how could she trust anyone? Especially someone like Viktor Volkov? "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why me? Why are you offering me this?" Victor leaned back in his seat, the calmness of his demeanor never wavering. "Because I see something in you that others don't. You're not broken, Sophia. You're just starting your journey. You don't need to be just a survivor. You can be so much more than that." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I run an empire, Sophia. I control everything here. But I need someone who isn't afraid of the challenges that come with that power. Someone who can rise above the rest. Someone who can understand how to move in this world, even when everything seems stacked against them. I see that in you. And I think you could see it in yourself too, if you let me show you." Sophia's mind raced as the weight of his words settled in. What Victor was offering wasn't just a refuge. It was a chance to rebuild herself, to take control of her future, to step into a world where she would be the one holding the reins. But it came at a cost. She didn't know exactly what that cost would be, but she could sense it. Victor's world wasn't one of kindness. It wasn't a place for the weak. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. Victor's gaze softened ever so slightly. "There's no catch. But loyalty is everything. You will answer to me. If you betray that trust, there will be consequences. But if you stand by me, you'll never have to worry about being discarded again." Sophia felt the weight of his words. The decision was in her hands. He wasn't offering her just a chance at freedom. He was offering her a new life, one where she could rise to power, but only if she was willing to play by his rules. She looked at Victor, her heart pounding. For the first time since Marcus had thrown her out, she felt a spark of something. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of something new. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll come with you." Victor nodded, a small but approving smile curling on his lips. "Good. This is just the beginning, Sophia. Welcome to my world." As the car sped through the city, leaving the rain behind, Sophia knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed forever. Sophia sat in the plush armchair in Victor's study, her eyes tracing the intricate patterns on the carpet beneath her feet. It had been hours since Victor had introduced her to his world, the world that now promised a future unlike anything she had ever imagined. And yet, she felt like an outsider, like a woman drowning in a sea of uncertainty. She was caught between two opposing forces: the life she had left behind and the life Victor was offering her. The night had turned quiet, the sound of the rain outside now a faint, rhythmic drumming against the windows. But within the mansion's walls, the air was thick with tension, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to make a choice. Victor had given her space, allowing her to absorb everything he had shared with her. His empire, the businesses he controlled, the networks of power and influence he wove through the city. But nothing felt clear yet. She hadn't signed anything, agreed to anything official. And still, his presence lingered in every corner of the room. His power, his voice, his unrelenting gaze. Her thoughts raced as she remembered the last few hours. Victor had started her initiation with small tasks, getting acquainted with his trusted associates, reviewing contracts, even joining a brief meeting with some of his most trusted business partners. She had felt a strange pull as she began to understand how deep Victor's reach extended. She had learned that what she thought she knew about power, business, and loyalty was only the surface of a much darker, more complex world. Sophia hadn't expected this life to be easy. But the more she became immersed in Victor's world, the more she realized that danger wasn't just a consequence, it was a constant companion. The first few weeks had been a blur of introductions to his associates, handling sensitive negotiations, and learning the ropes of the empire Victor had built. The life she had once known seemed distant, a mere shadow of the reality she now faced. Every move she made was scrutinized, every decision weighed against the intricacies of Victor's world. At first, it had all felt like a whirlwind, a maze of meetings, clandestine deals, and long hours spent strategizing. But soon, something shifted inside her. The more she learned about Victor's empire, the more she recognized the intricacies of the networks he had established. It wasn't just the legitimate businesses, tech firms, real estate ventures, and media empires, but also the dark underbelly of his operations. The people he controlled, the debts they owed, and the constant balancing act between the public face of his empire and the shadows in which he operated. Sophia found herself drawn to both sides. She had always been a problem solver in the business world, but Victor's empire required a different kind of strategy, one that blurred the lines between right and wrong, legal and illegal. She had no qualms about navigating these murky waters if it meant proving her worth. She had built a business before, and now, in Victor's world, she would rebuild her life. Her first big test came when Victor tasked her with handling a high-profile merger. It wasn't just any deal, it was a delicate situation that involved two powerful players, one with vast legal businesses and the other with deep ties to the underground world. Both wanted the same thing: control. The stakes were high, and Victor had placed his trust in her to get the deal done. Sophia dove into the negotiations headfirst. She spent hours reading financial statements, making calls to the right contacts, and using her business acumen to craft a proposal that would satisfy both parties while keeping Victor's interests at the forefront. There were moments when she felt the weight of the underworld closing in on her. Menacing figures in dark suits, veiled threats whispered in the corners of the room, But Sophia stood her ground. She used her intuition, her ability to read people, to navigate the precarious dance of diplomacy. The deal wasn't easy. It took days of back-and-forth meetings, threats, and some hard bargaining, but Sophia managed to pull it off. The merger went through, and Victor's empire expanded even further, adding another layer of power and legitimacy to his already vast control. Victor watched her closely during the process, his dark eyes never leaving her as she worked. He had always been impressed by her intellect and tenacity, but now he saw something more. Sophia wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a force. He had known from the beginning that she had potential, but he hadn't expected her to rise so quickly in his world. "You're good at this," Victor said one evening as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. The cold wind swept through the night, but it didn't touch the quiet intensity in his voice. "You're not just playing the game, you're changing it." Sophia felt a flicker of pride at his words, but she quickly buried it. She had worked hard for this, but she still didn't know where this journey would take her. She wasn't naive enough to believe Victor's approval came without strings attached. She had seen the way he wielded power, how he demanded loyalty and respect from everyone around him. It was a dangerous game, and the stakes were always high. As time passed, Victor's interest in Sophia grew beyond the business. He began inviting her to more exclusive meetings, involving her in strategy sessions with his most trusted allies. Their relationship was becoming more personal, though neither of them acknowledged it directly. Victor respected her mind, her ability to adapt, and her willingness to dive into the depths of his world. And Sophia, despite her reservations, found herself drawn to him. His power, his mystery, and the way he saw through the facades people put up. There were moments when they would lock eyes across a crowded room, and for just a second, everything else seemed to fade. It was an unspoken bond, built on mutual respect and something deeper. Something both alluring and dangerous. But with Victor's growing interest in her came a new set of challenges. Not everyone in his world was pleased with Sophia's rising influence. Victor's rivals, particularly those in the underground world, had begun to take notice of her involvement. They saw her as a threat, a potential liability who could upset the delicate balance Victor had spent years perfecting. One afternoon, Sophia found herself sitting in one of Victor's private offices, going over a stack of documents, when she received a message. A simple text from Victor. "There are eyes on you. Be careful." Her pulse quickened. She hadn't been naive enough to think she wouldn't have enemies, but now the reality of Victor's world was becoming clear. It wasn't just about business deals and expanding empires. It was about survival. In the Mafia, there was no room for mistakes. One wrong move and everything could collapse. A few days later, Victor called her into his office. He had a dark look in his eyes, one she hadn't seen before. "I've been hearing things," he said, his tone clipped. "Some of my people don't like that you've been getting involved in too many decisions. They think you're a threat." Sophia felt a tight knot form in her stomach. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Victor paused, his gaze flicking to the city skyline through the window. For a moment, he said nothing, but when he finally spoke, his voice was filled with quiet intensity. "I'll deal with them as I always do," he said. "But you need to be prepared. There are those who will try to undermine you. They'll use you to get to me, to destroy what I've built." Sophia's heart raced. "What do you want me to do?" Victor's eyes locked onto hers. "Fight back. Use the same tactics you've been using. Show them you're not someone to be underestimated." Sophia swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had already seen how ruthless Victor could be, how quickly he could dispose of anyone who crossed him. But this was different. This time she was in the line of fire. "What happens if I can't handle it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "You will handle it, or you will be eliminated, just like the rest." A chill ran down Sophia's spine, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. This was the world she had chosen, and now there was no turning back. Later that night, after leaving Victor's office, Sophia walked through the dimly lit hallways of the mansion, her mind racing. She had proven herself in Victor's world, But now the real test was beginning. As she turned the corner, she bumped into one of Victor's associates, someone she hadn't seen much of until now. He flashed her a quick, unsettling smile, and Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze held a threat. She turned away quickly, her heart pounding. The weight of Victor's warning echoed in her mind. There are those who will try to undermine you. Was this the first step in the game to destroy her? Chapter ends on a cliffhanger that leaves readers wondering if Sophia can survive the imminent threats against her. The mansion was quiet that evening, too quiet. The kind of silence that carried a weight, thick, almost suffocating. Sophia had learned to read the silence in Victor's world. It wasn't peace. It was a warning. It was the stillness before something broke. She had been with Victor for months now, and in that time, she had risen faster than anyone in his inner circle had expected. She handled high-stakes business deals with the precision of a surgeon, negotiated with rival families with a sharpness that surprised even Victor, and earned the grudging respect of the people who had once whispered that she was just another pretty pawn in his empire. But the higher she climbed, the more she began to see the cracks beneath the marble floors of Viktor Volkov's empire. The opulence around her, the glittering chandeliers, the tailored suits, the extravagant cars, was nothing more than a polished mask hiding something darker. Every contract she reviewed, every partnership she signed for Victor, came with shadows attached. Offshore accounts, political bribes, businesses that doubled as laundering fronts. She wasn't blind. She had built her own company once and knew the smell of corruption. This was different. This was systemic. And yet she couldn't walk away. Part of her was enthralled by the sheer scale of Victor's power. He moved through the world like a storm, bending everything in his path to his will. Men twice his size feared him. Billionaires deferred to him. Even government officials treated him with quiet respect. He was untouchable, and Sophia, for better or worse, had become part of that untouchable world. But that power came with whispers, rumors she could no longer ignore. It began subtly. A name here, a hushed conversation there. An old associate of Victor's, Alexei Morozov, vanished overnight after a disagreement. A shipping deal that went wrong ended with an entire crew missing at sea. When Sophia asked questions, people changed the subject. When she pressed further, they warned her with their eyes to stop asking. One night, she found herself alone in Victor's study. The door had been left slightly ajar, the room dimly lit by a single lamp on the mahogany desk. The shelves were lined with books, some about finance, others about history and war, but one drawer stood slightly open as if inviting her. Against her better judgment, Sophia stepped closer. Inside were folders, confidential ones stamped with government seals and marked classified. Her curiosity burned. She pulled one open, and the words on the first page made her blood run cold. A black market weapons deal. International smuggling. High-ranking politicians involved. And Victor's name everywhere. She snapped the folder shut just as the door opened behind her. Victor's voice was calm but carried the weight of steel. "You're curious, I see." Sophia turned, her pulse quickening. He was standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on her like a predator studying his prey. "You left it open," she said quietly. "I was just looking," he finished for her, his tone unreadable. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The soft click of the lock made her heart pound faster. "I've learned a lot about you, Sophia," Victor said, moving closer. "You're not afraid to dig for the truth. But sometimes," his gaze darkened, "the truth isn't meant to be found." Sophia's throat tightened. "I just wanted to understand the kind of business I'm helping you run. I deserve to know what I'm part of." Victor's jaw flexed. For a moment she thought he might lash out, but instead he surprised her. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and gestured for her to sit. "You want to know the truth?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Then you'll hear it from me." Sophia hesitated but sat down. Victor poured 2 glasses of brandy, handed one to her, and took the chair across from her. For a long time, he didn't speak. When he finally did, his words carried the weight of years of buried pain. "I wasn't born into power," he began. "I was born into chaos. My father was a soldier, a loyal one, but he was betrayed by his own men. My mother died when I was 10. The streets raised me after that. I learned that loyalty is an illusion, and mercy is weakness. By the time I was 16, I was running with men twice my age. By 20, I had built my own network. By 30, I controlled half the city. He took a sip of his drink, his gaze distant. Everything I have came from blood and fire. You see wealth, but what you don't see is the cost. The people I've lost. The things I've done to survive. Sophia watched him, torn between fear and understanding. There was something haunting in his voice, something that spoke of pain and rage that had long since been buried beneath ambition. "What about now?" she asked softly. "Do you regret it?" Victor looked at her then, his dark eyes glinting with something she couldn't name. Regret is a luxury. Power doesn't allow regret. It only allows control. Sophia's heart ached at his words. She saw the man beneath the armor, the child who had been broken by the world and rebuilt himself into something unyielding. But she also saw the monster that transformation had created. "Why tell me all this?" she asked. "Why show me who you really are?" "Because you deserve to know what you've chosen," Victor said simply. "This life isn't about right or wrong. It's about survival. You wanted control, Sophia. Now you have it. But remember, control always comes with a price." The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fireplace. Sophia stared into the amber liquid in her glass, her thoughts spiraling. She had wanted freedom from Marcus, from betrayal, from the pain of being powerless. But now she was realizing that she had traded one cage for another, this one gilded and dangerous. Later that night she couldn't sleep. Victor's confession echoed in her mind, but one thing bothered her more than anything: the folder. Project V. She waited until the mansion was silent again, then slipped back into the study. She needed to see more. Needed to know what Victor wasn't telling her. She opened the drawer and scanned through the documents. Her eyes widened as she found a photograph, an image of a warehouse explosion from years ago. Dozens of victims. The report listed it as an accident, but at the bottom of the page was Victor's signature. Her stomach dropped. That explosion hadn't been an accident. It had been his order. Suddenly, the door creaked open again, and Victor's voice came from the shadows. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" Sophia froze, the folder still in her hands. He stepped into the light, his expression unreadable, his gaze cutting straight through her. "You wanted the truth," he said, his tone low, dangerous. "Now you have it. What will you do with it?" Sophia's voice trembled as she spoke. "You killed those people, Victor. How could you?" He stepped closer, silencing her with a cold stare. "You think this world runs on kindness? Everything I've done was to protect what's mine. You don't survive by being good, Sophia. You survive by being feared." Her breath hitched as she met his eyes. The man who had saved her, who had given her purpose, was also capable of unimaginable cruelty. And yet, even as the truth burned her, she couldn't look away. Because deep down she knew, Victor wasn't just a monster. He was a mirror. He was everything she could become if she wasn't careful. Victor took the folder from her hands and placed it back on the desk. "You can walk away right now," he said quietly. "But if you stay, you'll never be the same again." Sophia looked at him, her heart pounding. She should have run. Every instinct told her to. But she didn't move. "I'm already not the same," she whispered. Victor's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good. Then the real game begins." And just like that, the line between power and corruption blurred completely. Sophia had never felt this alive, this vital. It was as if Victor had pulled her from the ashes of her old life and breathed new purpose into her. The power she had craved for so long, the control she thought she would never attain, was now hers, but not without its own darkness. As the days passed, her relationship with Victor shifted. What had begun as a purely transactional arrangement, her working for him, doing his bidding, began to evolve. There was a subtle change, almost imperceptible at first, in the way Victor looked at her, the way he spoke to her. His usual commanding tone softened at times, and when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Admiration. Affection. It was a dangerous game, and she knew it. But the more she learned about Victor's world, the more she realized she had no place for weakness. She could either sink or swim, and Victor had given her the tools to stay afloat. It was intoxicating, this power. She felt it in the way people looked at her now. She had earned Victor's respect, and through him, she had earned the respect of the people who once saw her as a mere outsider. In meetings with Victor's allies, she now held her own. She was no longer just the woman at his side. She was his partner. Her business acumen and sharp intuition made her a crucial player in his empire. When Victor needed someone to handle delicate negotiations or navigate a risky business move, it was her name he called. She wasn't just solving problems anymore. She was creating opportunities. And Victor noticed. He noticed the way she held her ground with his most trusted associates, the way she outwitted them in boardroom battles, the way she wasn't afraid to take charge when the situation called for it. What had once been an arrangement for mutual benefit was now an undeniable partnership. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city, the wind carrying a chill that made Sophia wrap her arms around herself, Victor spoke. "You've changed, Sophia," he said, his voice low. "When you first came to me, you were broken, lost. But now I see a woman who's found her place. You've earned more than just my trust. You've earned my respect." Sophia looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. For so long, she had been unsure of her place in this world, unsure if Victor truly saw her as anything more than a tool to further his empire. But tonight, something in the way he said those words made her believe, maybe, just maybe, there was something more between them. Something that had evolved beyond business. "You've taught me how to be strong," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "You've shown me what it means to take control of my life. I never thought I would be in this position, standing here with you. But now, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." Victor's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was a darkness to his eyes, something that made Sophia's chest tighten. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "You don't just follow. You lead. You see things for what they really are, and you're not afraid to make the hard decisions. That's what makes you valuable." Sophia's breath hitched at his praise, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table nearby. She glanced at it quickly, then froze. A single message flashed across the screen. "They have him. Make your choice." Her stomach dropped. It didn't take long for the realization to hit. Victor's rivals, those who had silently watched Sophia's rise, quietly seething with jealousy and fear, had made their move. The message was clear. They had taken someone Victor cared about. Someone close to him. The threat was direct. Sophia's mind raced. She didn't have to ask who he was. Victor's closest ally, a trusted member of his inner circle, had been kidnapped. This was no accident. This was retaliation. And now it was up to her to decide. Victor was already moving, his mind calculating the steps ahead. But Sophia wasn't sure how much longer she could stand on the sidelines. She had already chosen Victor's world once, and now this choice felt like a test she couldn't ignore. She turned to Victor, her heart pounding. "We need to act quickly. We can't let them get away with this." Victor's gaze was unreadable, but his voice was cold. "No. You need to stay out of this. This is my fight. You've done enough." Sophia's eyes hardened. "You're wrong. I've already chosen this life. You don't get to make me walk away now." Victor paused, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment she thought he might argue, might tell her to stay back like he always did. But instead, he nodded, the weight of his approval heavy in the air. "Fine," he said, his voice low but resolute. "But you follow my lead. No questions." Sophia didn't hesitate. She had already proven herself to him in boardrooms and in the shadows of his empire, and now she was going to prove that she belonged here, at his side, facing whatever dangers lay ahead. The car sped through the darkened streets, the neon lights flashing by in a blur as Victor and Sophia prepared to confront his enemies. The tension in the car was palpable. both of them understanding the magnitude of what was at stake. Sophia could feel the weight of the situation settling over her, but it wasn't fear she felt. It was resolve. As Victor glanced at her, his eyes dark and determined, he spoke in a low voice. "This is the moment, Sophia. You've chosen your side. But remember, there's no going back after this. You'll be tested like never before." Sophia nodded, the fire of determination burning in her chest. Whatever it took, she was ready. She had stepped into Victor's world, and now she would face its dangers head-on. The car screeched to a halt as they arrived at the location. Victor's men were already there, waiting. But Sophia could feel it, the weight of the danger, the shadows closing in. And as they stepped out into the night, she knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would change everything. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the cold night air, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. Victor's enemies were closing in, and she was caught in the eye of the storm. The quiet tension between them had built to this moment, and now every decision she made, every move she took, could have life-or-death consequences. She had stepped into Victor's world willingly, knowing it came with danger, knowing it came with sacrifices. But this was more than she had anticipated. His rivals, those who had always resented his rise to power, had finally decided to strike. And they weren't just targeting Victor, they were coming for her too. Sophia glanced over at Victor, who stood a few feet away, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. The cold wind whipped through his black coat, but he didn't flinch. He had been through worse, she knew. He had survived betrayal, violence, and loss. But this was different. His enemies weren't just trying to undermine him anymore. They were aiming to tear apart everything he had built. The game had always been ruthless, but now it had escalated into something much more personal. "Sophia," Victor's voice broke through her thoughts, low and steady. "There's no turning back from this. You need to understand that. If you're going to stand by me, you have to accept the consequences." She nodded, though her stomach tightened. "I know what I'm getting into. But I can't just stand by while you're in danger. You've brought me into this world, Victor. I can't sit back now." He turned to her then, his intense gaze locking with hers, and for a fleeting moment, something softer flickered in his eyes. "It's not just about the Empire anymore, Sophia. It's about you and me. You've become too important to me to let anything happen to you. But I won't ask you to walk away. I'll never do that. This world isn't kind, and if you want to survive it, you'll need to be just as ruthless as I am." Sophia felt a surge of something. Emotion she couldn't quite name. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to stand alone and make her own choices. But with Victor, she wasn't standing alone anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that could tear her apart or give her the strength to fight back. "I'm not afraid of the darkness, Victor," she said, her voice steady. "I've been there before. But I won't lose myself in it." He studied her for a moment, and in that silence she knew. Victor was letting his guard down. She could see it in the way he looked at her now, not just as his partner in business, but as someone he cared for deeply. "You're stronger than you know," he said quietly. "But remember, no one in my world is truly safe. Not even you." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Victor's empire had been built on loyalty, fear, and violence. It was a world where power was everything, and trust was something you earned, only to have it shattered when you least expected it. He had built his life on that very foundation, and now she was part of it. But with that bond came danger. Real, visceral danger. And it was more than just the threats Victor's rivals posed. It was the reality of who they were, what they had become, and what they were willing to do to protect themselves. Sophia could feel it now. The growing darkness of Victor's world was swallowing them both. "We'll face them together," she said, her voice firm. "I won't back down." Victor gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a sign of trust, of understanding. She wasn't just some woman in his world anymore. She was a partner. And in this moment, that partnership would be tested in ways neither of them could have predicted. The confrontation began just before dawn, the first light of the morning cutting through the skyline as Victor's men positioned themselves around the city. The plan was simple: take the fight to his enemies before they could get to him. But nothing in Victor's world was ever simple. Sophia found herself standing beside him in the war room, surrounded by the men Victor had trusted for years. They were silent, eyes focused on the strategy boards, weapons gleaming in the light. She had learned quickly that in Victor's world, there was no room for mistakes. Every move, every decision, could be a matter of life or death. Victor turned to her as they reviewed the final details of the operation. "This is it, Sophia. There's no turning back." Her heart raced, but she met his gaze with unwavering determination. "I'm ready." The night was thick with tension as they closed in on the enemy's location. Victor's plan was to hit them hard, hit them fast, before they could make their move. His men moved silently through the shadows, each step calculated, each movement precise. Sophia had never seen Victor like this before. His usual calm demeanor was now a mask for something deeper. His eyes burned with a focus that left no room for hesitation. "We strike in 15 minutes, Victor said, his voice low but sharp. "Be ready." Sophia nodded, checking the weapon at her side. She had trained for this moment, learned the ropes of Victor's world, but nothing could prepare her for what was coming. She had been part of his plans before. Business deals, mergers, negotiations. But this was war. As they approached the building, her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of Victor's world pressing down on her, the responsibility to protect what they had built. Victor wasn't just a mafia boss to her anymore. He was a man who had given her a chance when no one else would. He was someone she had come to trust, and now her loyalty would be tested in the most dangerous way. The battle was swift but brutal. Shots rang out, the sound of gunfire echoing through the night. Victor's men moved like shadows, efficiently taking down the rival group with ruthless precision. Sophia was in the thick of it, moving with purpose, her mind sharp as she worked alongside Victor's men to eliminate the threat. But as the final wave of resistance crumbled, something unexpected happened. The sounds of the fight were drowned out by a chilling message that came through Victor's earpiece. "They've got someone we care about," Victor's second-in-command said, his voice tight. "They've got her." Sophia's blood ran cold as Victor's face hardened. "Who?" she demanded, fear and rage swelling in her chest. "The woman who's been helping us on the inside," the man said. "They took her hostage to get to you, Victor." Victor's eyes blazed, his jaw clenching with fury. In that moment, everything changed. Sophia stepped forward, a cold resolve settling over her. She could feel Victor's anger, his desire to tear his enemies apart, but she also saw something else in his eyes. Vulnerability. He was no longer just a man who ran an empire. He was a man who had something to lose. "This isn't just about power anymore, is it?" Sophia said quietly, her voice steady. "It's about protecting the people we care about." Victor turned to her, his gaze burning with intensity. "You're right. And now, we face the consequences of everything we've done." As the door to the safe house slammed open, the final decision loomed. Victor's empire, his world, had led them here, and Sophia knew that from this moment on, everything they had built could either collapse or become unshakable. Would Victor sacrifice everything to protect the people he loved? Or would his empire consume them both? Let me know your thought in the comment section. The battle was over. The dust had settled, and the faint smell of smoke lingered in the air as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. It had been a night of reckoning, a violent, dangerous confrontation that had tested Victor and everyone he cared about. But now, in the aftermath, there was a quiet stillness. The sound of Victor's men securing the perimeter, the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows, and the soft murmurs of his inner circle. All of it seemed distant, as if the world had paused just for a moment. Victor stood in front of the large window in his study, staring out at the city that had once been the center of his empire, now quieter, darker, after everything that had unfolded. Sophia stood a few feet behind him, her arms crossed, her gaze lingering on Victor's back. She hadn't seen him like this before, unshaken but visibly changed. The man who had built this empire was now staring at its very foundations, contemplating not just the future of his business, but of his life. She could see it in his eyes, the storm of emotions he was grappling with, the weight of his choices. But now there was something else there. There was peace. "You did what you had to do," Sophia said quietly, breaking the silence between them. Victor didn't turn to face her immediately. His voice, when it came, was low, almost somber. "I've spent my whole life fighting. Fighting for control, fighting for power. For what? To protect a broken world? To live in the shadows of my own past." Sophia took a step closer, her eyes softening as she approached him. "The world is never as simple as black and white. But what you've built, it's more than just power. It's about loyalty. It's about protecting the people who matter." Victor finally turned, his gaze meeting hers. In that moment something shifted. It wasn't just the cold, calculating man who had once ruled this empire. It was a man who had finally come to terms with the sacrifices he had made, and the choices he was ready to embrace. "You're right," Victor said, his voice softer now. "And you've taught me that. You've shown me there's more to this than just winning. You've become more than just a partner to me, Sophia. You've become everything." Sophia felt a flicker of emotion stir in her chest, but she swallowed it down. This was no time for sentimentality. The future had already started to unfold before them, and she was determined to face it with the same unwavering resolve that had led her here. Victor stepped closer, his presence a comforting weight. "I've wronged so many people. Betrayed them. But you're different. You've earned my trust, Sophia. And more than that, you've earned my respect." Sophia met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I didn't come here for respect. I came because I wanted to control my own fate, to rise from the ashes of my past. And now I'm here because I choose this life. Because I choose you." A silence passed between them, thick with the unspoken understanding of everything they had been through, every test, every betrayal, every victory. It had led them to this moment. Together. Victor extended his hand, not as a boss to an underling, but as an equal to another equal. The gesture wasn't just about a business partnership. It was about something deeper, trust, loyalty, and perhaps something more. Sophia hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. "Together, then," she said firmly. "Together," Victor replied. The following days felt different. The power struggle between Victor and his enemies had been settled, but the aftermath was far from over. Victor had eliminated the threats to his empire, sending a clear message to those who had once sought to undermine him. But this time something had changed. Victor's actions had been driven by something other than vengeance. For the first time, it seemed that his choices were about building something lasting, something that wasn't just about control but about creating a legacy. Sophia found herself more involved in the day-to-day operations of Victor's empire than ever before. She wasn't just a partner now. She was a leader in her own right. Together, they made decisions, shared responsibilities, and guided Victor's vast empire into new legitimate territories. They worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. And yet, despite the challenges, the ever-present dangers that loomed over them, Sophia found a strength in herself she hadn't realized was there. She had always been a fighter. But now she was more than that. She was a force to be reckoned with. She wasn't defined by her past, by the pain of betrayal or the mistakes she had made. She had claimed her place in Victor's world, not as his pawn, but as his equal, his partner in every sense of the word. It wasn't long before they stood together again, this time on a private balcony overlooking the city. The skyline stretched out before them, a web of lights that seemed to pulse with life. But it wasn't just the city that felt alive. It was their future. The future they had carved out for themselves. Sophia stood at Victor's side, looking out over the city that had once been a battleground. Now, it felt like the canvas of a new beginning. Victor's voice broke through the silence. "I know I've made my fair share of mistakes, and there will be more battles ahead. But with you by my side, I know we can face anything." Sophia turned to look at him, her eyes soft but filled with unwavering confidence. "We're not just surviving anymore, Victor. We're living. And we're building something no one can tear down." Victor's gaze softened, and for the first time there was no darkness in his eyes, no secrets left to hide. He was simply a man who had found peace, and a woman who had found her place beside him. They stood together, side by side, ready to face whatever the future held. The battles they had fought had brought them here, but it was the love they had found along the way that would carry them forward. As they turned to leave the balcony, a faint sound echoed in the distance, a car's engine, rumbling faintly beneath the hum of the city. Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly as she heard it. A low, ominous feeling crept through her, but Victor's grip on her hand tightened reassuringly. "Don't worry," Victor said, his voice low. "We've built our future, and no one is taking it from us." But as they walked away from the balcony, neither of them noticed the figure watching them from the shadows. Someone new was coming. Someone who wouldn't be easily dismissed. And that, they both knew, was just the beginning.